What's up, folks? Welcome back to Tactical Tortoise. My name is Trevi, and today we are taking a look at this new article from Warhammer Community talking about the new set of mission cards being released for Warhammer 40k. This is the Pariah Nexus mission deck, and it is being released to replace the Leviathan mission deck that we've been using since the beginning of the edition. It looks like Games Workshop is going to be adopting an annual new mission cycle, and while I've been happy with the Leviathan mission deck, it definitely does have some problems, and I'm hoping to see that these new Pariah Nexus cards repair the issues with the Leviathan format. Now, some of the changes that the Pariah Nexus deck looks like they're going to be introducing into the format are hugely transformative. They are entirely redefining how I believe some armies are going to try to score the game, and they put new focuses for the mission cards. For example, we have these new mission rules, which include Raise the Banners and Rapid Escalation, which put a greater focus on battle line units. There hasn't been a huge incentive to include battle line units for most armies unless their game plan or their indexes were constructed around specific battle line units, and most of the time, non-battle line skirmishing units could take the place of utility, whereas I think the designers want you to be using more battle line infantry units as your utility objective scorers, and these cards certainly set that up, including giving battle line units the ability to score additional VPs on objectives thanks to the new Raise the Banners rule, and Rapid Escalation, which allows battle line units to arrive from strategic reserve in the first battle round. Now, there are going to be some armies that are insanely powerful with these changes. Armies with really strong battle line units, you can think things like Orcs with lots of Orc Boys, or even Thousand Sons with their Rubric Marines, or Gas-Based Marines with Legionaries love these changes. However, other armies may not be so affected. Now, these are mission rules, so these are going to be applied alongside a primary mission, as well as the secondary objective cards and the deployment card that you're choosing. So these are additional ways to interact with the table or score VPs beyond the normal primary mission. Now, they did also reveal a primary mission, and we are seeing a return of the action mechanic. Actions were used in 9th edition to describe units doing things that would typically score them VPs, things like raising banners or deploying teleport homers. We now use the colloquialism of action, but the action mechanic has been stripped from the game. At least it was in Leviathan. There was just a similar rule where units could give up their shooting activation if they were eligible to shoot in order to complete secondaries. It looks like the new action system is similar to stratagems. It describes when an action can be started, when that action is eligible to be used, and when it is completed. Now, we don't know what you give up for completing actions and whether or not it has the same criteria as performing quote-unquote actions in the Leviathan season, where all you have to do is be eligible to shoot but elect not to. Either way, this is a much nicer breakdown for this mechanic. Now, the primary mission being spoiled here is Terraform. It allows you to perform the Terraform action on objectives to score additional VPs from those objectives, up to 15 at the end of each of your command phases. Now, new secondary objectives have also been revealed. The article discusses booby-trapping terrain features, securing board edges, and this new one marked. This is a tactical secondary similar to Tempting Target. I think it's probably going to be fairly weak unless your opponent doesn't have many units on the table and has to select ones that are easier to engage, because there are oftentimes 3 units on the table that are probably not going to be in danger. Your opponent chooses 3 units that you have to destroy or remove from the battlefield during that round. If you destroy 1 or more of them by the end of any turn, you'll complete the objective and score 5 victory points. Interestingly, the objective cycles if your opponent is tabled. If they have no units on the battlefield, then it will just redraw itself, and that will also complete if any of the selected units leave the battlefield for any reason. So you can create instances where your opponent is forced to select units that would use an uppy, downy, or repositional effect, and if they ever leave the battlefield going into reserve or going into a transport, you'll actually score 5 victory points for that, which is pretty cool. Now, the biggest reveal in this article, and the one that I really want to talk about today, are the new secret mission mechanics. These are a replacement for gambits, an interesting idea for a comeback mechanic, but that was hilariously non-functional on the release of the Leviathan format, that were ludicrously difficult to complete, and most players didn't even use them. I didn't even shuffle my gambit cards into my deck for most games of 40k that I played. Now, at the end of the 3rd battle round, starting with the player who goes second, you can choose to take a secret mission if you so desire, but only if your victory point score is equal to or less than your opponent's. If you choose to try to complete a secret mission, you pick one of the cards from the deck. Now, we're not sure how many cards that there are, but there will likely be 3 or 4. Each card will have a special condition, and if you complete it, you earn 20 victory points. However, if you choose a secret mission, regardless of whether or not you complete it, your primary objective score is capped at 20. This means that while you can score 20 victory points from the secret mission and 20 points from your primary mission, you will never get to the max that you could possibly score. You're essentially taking a penalty of 10 VP from your cap in order to attempt the secret mission, and the secret missions don't seem to be the easiest things in the world. However, many times in very cagey games of 40k on missions that do not score very highly, you see the primary objective being capped at 25, 30, or 35 points, just based on missions that do not score particularly quickly. Whether or not those missions are included in the format is going to be crucial when judging these new secret missions. If we have missions like Scorched Earth, for example, that can only score players 10 victory points each round and are difficult to score because you have to be controlling multiple objectives, typically ones in no man's land that are evenly distributed across the center of the table and are relatively easy to contest, those will oftentimes be cut to 30-ish points per player each round. And if you can just take a 10 VP cut off of the 30 that you would normally score in order to take a secret mission and get yourself a 10-point bonus, that will be huge. However, I guess if you're tied, both players will have the opportunity to do so. So judging them based on the current format, these things look like in some instances and in some mission combinations, they are going to be incredibly strong. However, that is not necessarily always going to be the case. I think most players are able to score 15 or 20 points on primary passively in most missions, and so getting a potential 20 victory point bump on top of that is a huge deal for armies that are currently losing on primary score. And it gives you more of an incentive to try to block your opponent's secondary score, because if you can beat them on secondary and complete a secret mission, you can actually potentially defeat an opponent that is absolutely reaming you on the primary score. Now, 4 of our secret missions have been spoiled so far, and I believe that these are all of the secret missions that are going to be in the new deck. These include Command Insertion, which requires you to get your warlord within range of your opponent's home objective marker in their deployment zone by the end of the game. War of Attrition, which requires you to get one or more of your own battle-line units within your opponent's deployment zone, not wholly within, so it can just toe in with its little pinky toe, and also either destroy all of your opponent's battle-line units or force all of your opponent's battle line units to enter their deployment zone. Shatter Cohesion scores either if you have tabled your opponent or if all of your opponent's units are either below half strength, battle shocked, or more than 3 inches away from any objective markers. This one is a classic for armies like Tyranids or potentially Adeptus Sororitas that score highly but are not the most resilient armies in the world and oftentimes have to trade units for scoring. There are many situations in which they're almost tabled at the end of the game, however, they have such a scoring lead that the other player can't defeat them. However, if they are going to choose Shatter Cohesion, they could jump in at the late game and try to table their opponent's army for the win. Now, this is still going to be very difficult. 10th edition actually is not a very tabling heavy game. I haven't noticed many tables happen in the game so far, although it does happen, to be clear. But this one has the potential to punish those armies that rely almost entirely on scoring. Unbroken Wall is the last one. You control 3 or more objective markers not within your deployment zone. That includes the objective markers in no man's land and or the one in your opponent's deployment zone. This one feels much better for a slower and tankier army that is going to struggle to score victory points in the early game, but can spread out across the table in the late game. Armies like Death Guard or Adeptus Custodes oftentimes create situations like this, where they will have units remaining at the end of the game that can run out and grab those objectives, but they will be movement blocked or screened out from being able to do so early. Now, an interesting thing that we can see here based on the primary mission that's been spoiled, Terraforming, plus the secret mission cards, is that bottom round 5 primary scoring is still around. We can see Terraforming scores at the end of each command phase or at the end of your turn in the 5th battle round if you are the second player. This means in cases of missions that have this clause, you will score your primary mission and your secret mission at the same time. So, one thing to keep in mind is that you could be scoring close to 100% of your primary objective score based on your secret mission and the 20 points you can get from scoring objectives normally on that 5th battle round. So if you are looking at missions like Command Insertion or Unbroken Wall, you will typically be scoring massive gluts of points at that late game stage. And again, if it's a situation where you can contest your opponent in the early game and you prevent them from scoring too highly in order to complete these secret missions, that can flip the score on its head in a single turn. Now, I think these secret missions are definitely a more interesting mechanic than gambits. They actually provide some sort of choice. You're not just automatically gonna ignore them for the entire game, but there are some factions that use them incredibly well. Factions that have high mobility, power for warlords like Angron or Magnus that can score Command Insertion, or like I said before, tanky armies that can score Unbroken Wall, or very aggressive armies that could potentially score Shatter Cohesion, are all going to have pretty good options. Where I'm worried about this mechanic is that if it becomes better to play for your secret mission than it does for your regular primary, that shifts all of the focus to the game to the 4th and 5th battle rounds and makes early game scoring really not matter so much at all. There are going to be a lot of instances where you can take a lot of really light objective contesting units, really disruptive units, things like Tyranid Gargoyles, for example, that can run out in the middle of the table and keep your opponent's primary score low. Then in the late game, you can windmill slam an Unbroken Wall onto the table, run your units up to the center, take all of the objectives at the end of the game, and then win from there. My hope is that the primary missions are balanced to score quickly enough that secret missions like these are not always going to be the most powerful option, but I definitely think it is going to be something that people are going to have to think about as it gets to the end of the game. Now, one little benefit that we do have when it comes to this mechanic is the fact that you must declare on the end of the 3rd battle round that you are using these secret missions. Your opponent is operating under the assumption that you have chosen one, which means they can then look at the 4 secret missions and try to counter deploy them. If you have a good army with a fast warlord, something like an Autarch Wayleaper or Magnus the Red, who could get Command Insertion, your opponent encircling their home objective to make it impossible for units to move onto that objective with double moving effects could potentially win you the game by denying that Command Insertion. Similarly, you can put enough objective control units on the center objectives if you think your opponent is going to go for Unbroken Wall to try to prevent them from scoring that one too. If the player choosing the secret mission is going first as well, things get even tougher for them because they must score at the end of the battle, not at the end of your 5th turn, meaning that most of the time the player with the secret mission is going to move on to these objectives and hope to hold on for a turn, and you'll get an opportunity to kill them. If, for example, they're choosing Unbroken Wall and have put units on all 3 objectives, and you kill units off of a single one of those objectives or move your own high OC units to contest it, then they lose 20 points immediately. So there is a lot of risk reward, especially if you're going first. Going second, these actually seem like a windmill slam, but going first, I could definitely see there being situations where your opponent can respond effectively and prevent these from being able to be scored. But anyway, that's our Warhammer community reveal for today. Let me know down in the comment section how you feel about these new cards, whether you think the secret mission mechanic is going to be transformative to games. Thanks for watching all the way to the end of the video, and thanks everyone who supports the channel either over on Patreon at patreon.com/TacticalTortoise, YouTube channel members, and Twitch subscribers. I love you all. Remember to keep it classy, folks, and have happy wargaming.